My name is Elaine Morris. I'm 64 years old, a retired school principal living in Knoxville, Tennessee, or at least I used to be. These days, I mostly live in silence. I raised one child, my son, Brandon, after my husband passed away 14 years ago. I was 50 when it happened. We'd just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary, and 2 weeks later, Henry was gone. Heart attack, in the middle of a staff meeting. He died doing what he loved, running the logistics company we'd built from scratch in our garage back in the late 80s. He left behind the company, our home, and our son, who was only 19 at the time, and me. He left me, too. You never think grief will stay forever, but it does. It just changes clothes now and then. Today, it wears a suit and speaks in my son's voice. Before I take you too deep, do me a favor. If this story moves something in you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel like dead weight, like I was by my own blood, please like this video, subscribe, and share. I don't share my story for pity. I share it because silence protects the wrong people. And I've been silent long enough. I've always been a quiet woman, but I was never weak. I worked 2 jobs while Henry got our business off the ground. I was the first in my family to finish college, and the first woman in my district to be promoted to principal without being married to a board member. I fought for everything I ever had. So when Brandon, my only son, stood in my kitchen just 6 weeks after I had gotten out of the hospital and called me a burden, it didn't just hurt, it broke something. It was a Sunday. Cold. I remember because the rain had been hammering the windows all night, and I had to wrap my shawl tight just to make it from the bedroom to the kitchen. I was still recovering from a nasty fall I'd taken in the driveway, fractured my hip. I'd spent 8 days in the hospital, mostly alone. Brandon came once. Once. He'd forgotten my favorite blanket, so the nurse lent me one from their linen closet. That's how I knew she felt sorry for me. Pity has a smell. It smells like disinfectant and disappointment. Anyway, that Sunday morning, Brandon had come by to check on me, which I now realize meant to check if I had died in the night. He stood at the counter eating a peach like he owned the place, even though he hadn't lived here in almost 10 years. I was leaning on my cane, trying to get the kettle on. I could feel his eyes watching me struggle, but not helping, just watching. That's when he said it. "Mom, maybe it's time to consider assisted living. You're just not, well, you're not what you used to be. And frankly, keeping up this house, your bills, and the company, it's becoming a lot." I froze. I thought maybe I'd heard him wrong. But then he sighed, long and rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "I've actually been talking to a couple of people about the business. Selling it while it still has value, before it crashes under, well, your inexperience." "Excuse me?" I managed. He didn't flinch. He's just saying, "Mom, come on, don't be prideful. It's not about you. It's about what's practical. You're 64, not 44. We can't pretend like you can handle things the way you used to. Besides, if we sell now, I can get ahead on the new property in Atlanta." That's when it clicked. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about funding his next big ego trip. He wasn't my son anymore. He was a wolf with good posture. That night after he left, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that makes you hear everything you've tried to forget. I thought about how he'd made me feel like a dying animal being asked to lie down. I thought about the hospital stay, the cold peach pit he left in my sink, The smirk when he said, "You're inexperienced." I thought about my husband, Henry, who used to hold my hand under the boardroom table and whisper, "You're the real boss, you know." Then I stood up. It took everything in me, but I did it. I walked to the closet, I pulled out the shoebox that held the safe key, and I opened the one thing I'd never shown anyone, not even Brandon. The ownership agreement, my power of attorney, my living trust, and the last sealed letter Henry wrote me before he died. Elaine, if Brandon ever forgets who you are, remind him. I ran my fingers over his handwriting, and right then, I knew. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. That night after Brandon left, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, robe wrapped around me, just listening to the rain crack against the window pane like it had something urgent to say. All I could think was, how did we get here? How did that soft-cheeked little boy who used to fall asleep with his head on my lap become this stranger in designer loafers, planning how to bury me with a smile? I'd sacrificed everything for him. Every birthday party I missed because I was working late at the school. Every college loan I paid off twice. Every lie I told myself that he was just finding his way. Maybe the truth is, he was always this way, and I just didn't want to see it. But I saw it now, clear as daylight. 2 days later, I got a call from Gina, our company's longtime secretary. Sweet woman, bless her heart, she's been with us since '94. Said Brandon had shown up unannounced at the office that morning, asked to see financial records, and hinted at some transitional restructuring. Said he acted like he already owned the place. I didn't tell her much, just thanked her and told her not to worry. Then I hung up the phone and sat real still. He wasn't wasting time. And you know what? That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just greedy. He was confident. He truly believed I'd already handed over my authority, that I was weak, that I'd go quietly. So I decided to let him think he was right. The next Sunday, I invited him back over. I made lemon pound cake, the kind he used to beg for as a kid, set the table like it was Easter morning, and when he walked in, cocky and humming to himself, I smiled like nothing had happened. "This is nice," he said, pulling off his coat. "Kind of figured we might not be on speaking terms." "I've been thinking," I said gently, pouring his tea. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it is time to start letting go of some things." His eyes lit up. "Yeah?" he asked, trying to play it cool. "I mean, I just want what's best for everyone. I'm not trying to take over, just help you transition smoothly." I nodded like I believed every word. "You've always had a sharp mind, Brandon. Your father would have been proud to see you stepping up." That line, mentioning his father, landed exactly the way I'd planned. He softened, he smiled, but inside, I was ice. Over the next week, I fed him breadcrumbs, accidentally leaving out old company folders, asking for his advice on vendor contracts, making him feel like he was slowly earning my trust back. He started stopping by more often, sometimes bringing store-bought soup, like that made up for a year's worth of neglect. And with every phony grin, every helpful suggestion he gave me about modernizing the logistics, he sunk deeper into my trap. I also paid a quiet visit to our family attorney, Mr. Palmer, and had a long conversation, one that I should have had years ago. We reviewed the trust documents, updated my living will, assigned new legal contingencies for succession, just in case. "Are you planning to transfer ownership?" he asked, eyeing me curiously over his wireframe glasses. "No," I said, firm. "I'm planning to remind my son who built this empire." The deeper Brandon got into his fantasy takeover, the bolder he became.
One evening, he asked if I wanted help drafting a resignation letter for the board. I had to physically steady my hand on the armrest. "Oh, I hadn't even thought about that yet. Maybe you can help me put something together this week." He nodded, puffed up with pride, like he was doing me a favor. I was watching him rehearse my eulogy while I was still breathing. But the moment that finally lit the fuse came 2 weeks later. I'd been sitting on the porch watching the late afternoon sun pour through the dogwoods when Gina called again. "Miss Elaine, I think you ought to know. Your son brought a broker into the office today. Said he's reviewing valuation offers for a sale. Even asked for last year's P&L. I don't remember setting the phone down or walking back inside. All I remember is the pounding in my ears and the way my heart settled into this cold, determined thud. That boy didn't just think I was weak, he thought I was gone. That night, I cooked dinner. Real dinner. Pot roast, sweet corn, green beans with bacon, buttermilk biscuits, the whole southern spread. I invited Brandon over. He showed up late, on the phone, talking loud about private equity and fast-tracking the acquisition. He didn't even say hello, just wandered into my kitchen like it was already his. "Smells amazing, Ma. This some sort of early celebration?" "Something like that," I said, smiling back. "You really didn't have to go all out," he said between mouthfuls. "But hey, if this deal closes the way I think it will, I'll make sure you're very comfortable. Maybe a condo with a lake view." "How thoughtful," I said, dabbing my napkin. "And what about the employees, the ones who've been with us since the start?" He shrugged. "It's business, Mom. You can't get sentimental." That was it. Right there. That word, sentimental, like loyalty was a flaw, like people were disposable, like I was. I stood up, walked to the drawer beneath the phone stand, and pulled out a thick envelope. "What's this?" he asked. I laid it on the table in front of him. His name was typed neatly across the top. Inside, a formal letter, terminating his access to all company accounts, revoking his consultation privileges, and declaring my intention to remain CEO until further notice. Also inside, a full copy of the company charter with my name listed as sole majority shareholder, and a signed affidavit from the board backing my continued leadership. He blinked, swallowed, blinked again. What is this?" he asked, voice low. "This," I said, calmly, "is me reminding you who the hell I am." He looked up at me like he didn't recognize me. Good. I wanted him to see me clearly for the first time in his life. He didn't say much after that, just gathered his coat, tight-lipped, and left without touching his sweet tea. I stood in the doorway watching his car pull away, the night sky bruising overhead. I should have felt victorious, powerful, unshakable, but all I felt was tired. Because as much as he deserved the humiliation, he was still my son. And somewhere buried under all that entitlement and arrogance, I kept hoping that scared little boy I raised was still in there. The next morning, I opened my email and found something I wasn't expecting. A message from our Vice President of Operations. "Mrs. Morris, we need to talk. There's something about Brandon you should know. It's urgent." I sat staring at the email for what felt like hours. Just one line from our VP of Operations, Terry. "There's something about Brandon you should know. It's urgent." My stomach churned. I'd already handled the worst, hadn't I? I'd pulled the rug out from under my son's scheme, shut the door on his little empire before he could build it. I'd reclaimed my name, my business, and my dignity. So why did I feel like something else, something uglier, was crawling up behind me? I called Terry immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Elaine," he said,
voice tense. "I didn't want to put this in writing, but I think you need to see something." We met at the office that afternoon. He pulled up a series of emails and financial memos on his tablet, all tied to Brandon, all dated over the past 6 weeks. While I'd been letting him back in, Brandon had been trying to sell proprietary client data to a competing firm in Atlanta. He'd used his brief access to the internal server to download private shipping contracts, vendor pricing, and warehouse routing software. He was going to gut us. Not just sell the company, cripple it. Make a quick buck and leave me holding the wreckage. Terry looked at me, waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just nodded. Because I finally understood what Henry meant in that letter. If Brandon ever forgets who you are, remind him. This was the moment. This was what he meant. Not just defending myself, defining myself. By the end of the week, our legal team had filed a cease and desist against the Atlanta firm, citing stolen data and attempted interference. And I made one final move. I filed a formal fraud complaint against my own son. It broke my heart, but not as much as he had broken my trust. I knew pressing charges would sever whatever thread still tied us together. But I also knew that if I didn't, he would never stop. He wasn't going to learn. Not with kindness, not with grace, and not with the benefit of the doubt I foolishly gave him for most of his adult life. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was survival. Brandon didn't respond to my texts, didn't call, didn't show up. But one day I got a letter in the mail. Just my name, handwritten in his jagged, rushed scrawl. Inside, just one page. "I guess I shouldn't have underestimated you. You were never weak, just quiet. Too quiet. I'm sorry. Don't expect forgiveness. I know I haven't earned it. Just tell Dad I tried." I sat with that letter in my lap for hours. I reread it until the words blurred. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was a white flag from someone who never thought he'd lose. The fraud complaint went into arbitration. He'll never work in corporate again. He avoided jail time, mostly because I chose not to press criminal charges. I figured letting the world see who he really is was punishment enough. He moved out of state shortly after. I heard from a friend of a friend that he's trying to launch some kind of e-commerce thing. Honestly, I don't care. That chapter is closed. And me? I'm still here. Still living in the same house with the wraparound porch Henry built. Still running the company, although I've stepped back a little. I promoted Gina to senior ops manager, and Terry is prepping to take over as CEO when I fully retire next year. I even started mentoring a young woman at the local business incubator. Bright as a firecracker, reminds me a little of myself when I was just getting started. Before marriage, before motherhood, before silence. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear Brandon's voice in my head. "You're just not what you used to be." But he was wrong. I'm more. More than a mother. More than a wife. More than some fragile old woman with trembling hands. I'm the steel behind the silence. The spine of this family and the owner of every last share. I won't lie. There are days I still ache. Days when I pass his old room and wonder what I could have done differently. Where I failed, or if I did. But then I remember that my love was never the problem. His choices were. And now, finally, so were mine. So that's my story. I don't know if it counts as revenge in the explosive sense. There were no shouting matches, no dramatic showdowns, just a woman who finally stopped waiting for her son to see her worth and reminded him of it instead. Quietly, powerfully, and without ever raising her voice. Sometimes the best revenge is simply reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to erase. If you've ever felt underestimated or dismissed, especially by the people who were supposed to love you, drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you found your voice again. And if the story hit close to home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to be reminded. You are not a burden. You are the backbone.